Dr. Perry Carpenter. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to join me on this week's video. And in this week's video, we're in our sixth and final session of our ongoing program entitled the QME Report Compliance, Credibility, and Persuasiveness Check Sheet. And if I seem extra happy today, it's because I always get a little extra happy in our final session of a current program that we're discussing, because it signals the conclusion of a series of topics that are designed to improve the content and quality of the work that you as a qualified medical evaluator put out into the marketplace. And in this program, we've spent the entirety of 6 complete hours talking about some very specific steps that you can take to improve the content and the quality of your finished product, which bears your name out in cyberland forever and ever, and that is your final product QME report. And in today's session, what I want to share with you is the product that I've been promising you throughout the entirety of this program, and that is the check sheet that you can use to check your report against both before and after your report is written. So when I say that, what I mean is that you can use the check sheet in the process or even before your report is written in order to guide you towards the elements and the features that are necessary within the body of your report. And then after your report is written, you can check your report against the check sheet to make sure that you've covered all the bases and hit all the high notes that the readers of your report need in order to be able to use your report to resolve disputed issues in the workers' compensation system. So the entire philosophy of this report has to do with creating what is being newly defined out in the industry as a high quality report. This term of a high quality report signals a new goal by the parties in the workers' compensation system, and that goal has to do with getting qualified medical evaluators to produce better and better quality in their reports. And by quality, what the parties mean when they talk about the quality of the QME report is basically 2 things. Number 1, that the report be formatted in a certain consistent standardized way across all qualified medical evaluators, which of course is completely contrary to the way qualified medical evaluators are now producing their reports, which is basically unique to each and every qualified medical evaluator. Each qualified medical evaluator has his own template that he uses, that he or she uses, their own particular format, their own particular topic headings, and the QME reports are all over the board with no standardization. So in an attempt to get QME reports more standardized, the parties are demanding that we follow a specific formatting in our reports, and that formatting is described in CCR 10606. So that's step number 1 to creating higher quality reports, is to have all qualified medical evaluators on the same page and discussing the same necessary topics in each of their reports. So that's step number 1. Has to do with the scaffolding or the formatting or the framework or the foundation of the physical product itself. It must be formatted according to standardized law, which is described in CCR 10606. So that's step number 1. And then step number 2, within the body of the report, okay, so once the framework and the scaffold and the skeleton of the report is established, then within the skeleton, that the words that the qualified medical evaluator uses within the body of the report, those words accomplish 2 basic objectives. Number 1 is that the qualified medical evaluator answers all the questions that are posed by the parties in the cover letters that are sent to the qualified medical evaluator. Now, in discussing this with qualified medical evaluators, many qualified medical evaluators will tell you that they consider the cover letters that they receive basically to be non-issues. They consider the cover letters to be nonsensical. They consider the cover letters to be simply canned, templated, formatted letters, not customized to the particular examinee involved in the evaluation. And so qualified medical evaluators as a group generally tend to discount and disregard the cover letters that they receive, but yet the parties who take the time and the effort and the energy necessary to create cover letters and send cover letters want to have the questions in their cover letters fully addressed and fully answered by the qualified medical evaluator. So in the future, the parties are going to demand that qualified medical evaluators answer all the questions, and in those circumstances where the qualified medical evaluator does not fully and to the satisfaction of the parties address the questions in the cover letters, and the parties are then prompted to request a supplemental report from the qualified medical evaluator in order to get answers to the questions from the original cover letter, the claims payers are not going to be paying for those supplemental reports. So let me tell you, you're going to learn to answer the questions in the cover letter by hook or by crook, either willingly or kicking and screaming all the way. But the parties have a plan to get the answers to their questions from the qualified medical evaluator. And if you don't do it properly the first time through, you won't be paid for your second, third, and fourth efforts at it. So it's important that you adopt a new philosophy and a new muscle in your medical decision-making brain that makes it easier and easier for you to answer the questions posed by the parties in the cover letters. Secondly, now, is that when the qualified medical evaluator does answer the questions that are posed by the parties in the cover letters, that the qualified medical evaluator's answers to those questions, those answers have to qualify as substantial medical evidence. Now, the reason that this is a problem out in the marketplace and in the industry is because qualified medical evaluators have not developed this medical decision-making muscle in their brain. They haven't developed the capacity to fully address the difficult questions that are posed by the parties in the cover letters. That's one thing. They haven't developed that particular muscle. And then they haven't developed that muscle to the extent that the answers can rise to the lofty standard, the high standard, the difficult to attain standard of substantial medical evidence. And completing these two steps simply requires that you as a qualified medical evaluator develop this muscle, this stick-to-it muscle, stick-to-itiveness muscle in the center of your medical decision-making brain to such an extent that this process becomes easy and second nature for you. So the purpose of this program is to help you with that. And the purpose of our check sheet now is to help you develop this medical decision-making muscle to Herculean standards such that you can whip out these reports basically in effortless fashion and very quickly and efficiently get these reports off your desk. So I want to share with you today the check sheet. And the check sheet is 5 pages. I have it right here, and we're going to go over a couple of sections in the check sheet. It includes 21 major sections, and all of those sections are formatted exactly according to CCR 10606. And then within each of the sections, the check sheet contains guidance for you to help you answer the questions that are posed by the parties in the cover letters, and also guides you in fashioning your responses to those questions in such a way that they qualify as substantial medical evidence and therefore can be used by the parties in resolving disputed issues in the case. Okay, so what I want to do with you today is I want to share with you a couple of sections from the check sheet and show you how you would apply those to your current report. And then once we've done that, I'll show you some actual sections from the check sheet so that you can see what it involves and what it entails and what it includes. Okay, so with that as our introduction, let's begin today's discussion, which has to do with the compliance, credibility, and persuasiveness check sheet. Okay, so let's begin. And what I want to share with you in just the brief session that we have in today's discussion, I want to share with you just a couple of sections from the check sheet. And I want to demonstrate to you how in the body of your report you can accomplish three objectives. Number one, you can demonstrate your compliance with all of the labor codes and codes of regulation that govern both the face-to-face evaluation and also the production of your QME report. And you can communicate to the parties in such a way that it enhances your credibility and your persuasiveness as a qualified medical evaluator by, number one, demonstrating to the parties your compliance with codes and regulations, demonstrating your compliance. In other words, it's one thing to comply with codes of regulation, codes, labor codes, and codes of regulation. It's another thing entirely to demonstrate, to make it known, to make it obvious, to impress the parties with your compliance to the labor codes and codes of regulation. So when you demonstrate to the parties your compliance, this enhances your credibility and persuasiveness as a meticulous and fastidious qualified medical evaluator who has a terrific attention to detail. And when you can impress the parties with your attention to detail, it enhances the strength and conviction of the final opinions and conclusions in your report. So I want to share with you just a couple of sections of your report and how the check sheet will guide you in producing your report in such a way. So the first section of the check sheet has to do with the introductory comments in the beginning of your report. And in the introductory section of your report, we demonstrate to the parties our compliance with several key codes of regulation, including CCR 34B, CCR 35.5B, which deals with the location of the appointment. We deal with CCR 40, which is the disclosure requirements, which, by the way, most, I mean 98% of all qualified medical evaluators do not include this particular step in their face-to-face evaluation. And not only is it required by law, it's a very important procedure, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to that. And then finally, when it comes to billing for your report, it's California Code of Regulations 9795 that governs the billing level for which you bill your report. And there are some very specific requirements described in CCR 9795 that you must include in your report if you want to get paid the amount of money for which you bill your report. And I'll share with you how to credibly and persuasively indicate to the parties that you comply with every one of the complexity factors described in CCR 9795, and that you persuasively and credibly communicate to the parties why you deserve to be paid in full for each of the complexity factors that you include in the billing level for your report. Okay, so let's just go over a couple of these codes of regulations, and then we'll spend a little bit of time talking about the complexity factors. Okay, so CCR 34B tells us that the location of the QME appointment, wherein we evaluate the injured worker face-to-face, has to meet certain requirements. And CCR 34B tells us that the QME shall schedule an appointment for the first, key word, for the first comprehensive medical legal evaluation, which shall be conducted only at the medical office listed on the panel selection form. So the first time you see the injured worker face to face, that appointment must be, by law, the law is CCR 34B, must be at the location that's described on the panel. So under your name on the panel is a certain address, and the appointment location must by law be at that address. It says only at the medical office listed on the panel selection form. So in the introductory section of your report, you want to demonstrate to the parties that you complied with CCR 34B, and the check sheet makes it impossible for you to omit this step in your report. Now, similarly, and along the same lines of demonstrating compliance with the location requirements of the face-to-face evaluation, CCR 35.5B tells us that each reporting evaluator shall state in the body of the comprehensive medical legal report the date that the evaluation was completed and the street address at which the examination was performed. So the Division of Workers' Compensation is serious that we comply with location requirements and that we not be conducting QME evaluations at locations other than the location that's listed on the panel. So in complying with these requirements, we include in the body of our report the information that the Division of Workers' Compensation is requiring. So not only do we comply with not changing locations and maintaining the integrity of the location, we demonstrate to the Division of Workers' Compensation and to the reader of our report that the location at which the evaluation was conducted is none other than the location that's listed on the panel. And the check sheet makes it impossible for you to omit this step. And in this way, the check sheet protects you from doing behaviors and activities such as changing locations that could compromise the integrity and safety of your QME credential. Okay, so we demonstrate our compliance to the parties with these two codes in the introductory section of our report, and that's not all. In addition to those two codes of regulation, in the introductory section of our report, we want to demonstrate to the parties our compliance with California Code of Regulation 40, which is known as the disclosure requirements. Now, if you're not already doing this procedure in your face-to-face evaluation with your examinee, I strongly encourage you to do this procedure. Number one, because it's required by law. And then number two, because, and I've discussed this in other programs, the disclosure requirements is a tremendously powerful procedure that creates rapport between you and the examinee. And it's such a powerful procedure that it's not to be omitted. First by law, and then second by common sense, because it helps to develop a strong bond between you and the examinee. So not only do we want to comply with this procedure, we want to demonstrate to the parties that we indeed did comply with this procedure. So I just want to take a brief section from CCR 40. Section A tells us that an evaluator who's selected from a QME panel shall advise. Shall advise. Shall advise means it's mandatory. This is a mandatory procedure. That the QME shall advise an injured worker prior to or at the time of the actual evaluation of the following. And the purpose of this discussion is not to go over CCR 40, but I recommend that you do this procedure at the time of the actual evaluation because it strengthens the effectiveness of this procedure. And at the time of the evaluation, CCR 40 has about 4 different things that you're required to advise the examinee of regarding their rights during the face-to-face evaluation. It's such a powerful procedure. It's required. And the check sheet, number one, makes sure that you perform this actual procedure. And number two, that within the introductory section of the report, you demonstrate to the parties your compliance with the disclosure requirements. And this is so powerful. And if you'll simply include this within the body of your very next QME report, this alone will set your report head and shoulders above 98% of all other QME reports. Okay? So now let's talk a little bit about credibly and persuasively demonstrating to the parties your compliance with the complexity factors, which has to do with the billing level of your reports. Okay, so let's talk about the complexity factors, which are described in CCR 9795. Now, of all the sections in your report, speaking from the perspective of you as the qualified medical evaluator who wants to get paid in full for the time, effort, and energy expended in the production of the report, of all the sections in the report, do you think it necessary that the billing section of your report should comply with regulations, that it should be credibly demonstrative of your compliance with the regulations that describe the complexity factors? Should this section of your report be persuasive? Should your report persuasively indicate to the parties that you should and that you deserve to be paid in full for the amount for which you're billing for the report? Okay, so let me give you an analogy. Let's say for example you took your car to a detail shop and you asked for the works, the California special, the full detail, which includes the tires, the rims, the underbody, wash, wax, windows, vacuum, the whole works. Now, when you're presented with the billing for your car detail, how are you going to determine if you should pay for each of the itemized services delineated on that bill? How could you tell that you should pay for the charges for the wheel service, the rims and the wheel detail service? How could you tell if you should pay for that service? Wouldn't you determine the eligibility of payment for that service by looking at the wheels? Wouldn't you look at the wheels? Now, if the wheels were brilliantly shiny, the rims were impeccably clean, and the rubber tires were brilliantly detailed with shiny stuff, would you then conclude that you rightfully should pay for that service? Okay, you would inspect the service. Now, what if the service discloses that the rims are dirty, that the tires are dirty, that there's no attention at all given to that particular service, and yet the itemized service shows up on your billing? Would you then be willing and eager to pay for that service when it's clear that that service has not been performed? I know this is a silly analogy, but many qualified medical evaluators are making this mistake within the body of their report by billing for service levels and complexity factors that have no evidence that the rims have been cleaned and the tires have been shined. Okay, sounds simple, but let me share a couple things with you that the check sheet will help you with in complying with the complexity factors and in credibly and persuasively communicating to the payer that you deserve and you demand to be paid in full because you complied with all of the complexity factors. Okay? So the first requirement of CCR 9795 is that your billing contain a clear and a concise statement in a separate section at the beginning of the report, and you'd be amazed at how many qualified medical evaluators put this section at the end of the report, in which case they don't comply with the language of CCR 9795. And if I was the claims payer and I found the complexity factors listed at the end of the report, would you pay for those complexity factors? I wouldn't pay for those complexity factors. Would you pay for the rim and tire detail if the rim and tire detail wasn't done? Okay, so in our check sheet, it coaches you and prevents you from putting this statement anywhere in the body of your report except for where it's supposed to be, which is at the beginning of the report. Further, the complexity factors should be clearly substantiated. Clearly substantiated, meaning your description of them has substance and merit, and contain evidence of support throughout the report in the various sections of the report that deal with the complexity factors. Each complexity factor has a page number and a reference in the report. So for example, if you're invoking causation as a complexity factor, you refer the reader of the report to the page in your report wherein you discuss causation as a complexity factor. Similarly, for apportionment, you direct the reader of the report to the particular page in the report where they can find your grandiose discussion of this particular complexity factor. Additionally, each section of the report that deals with a complexity factor should be a masterpiece, a masterpiece. It should be fabulous. It should be brilliant. It should be spectacular. Of all the sections in your report wherein you want to spend your time, effort, and energy, where do you think that time, effort, and energy should be best spent? Of course, it's in those sections of your report that deal with the complexity factors. So if you're invoking apportionment as a complexity factor, when the reader of the report goes to the apportionment section of the report, the apportionment section of your report should not simply state, apportionment is not an issue with this report. That description is a little brief and is a little terse and does not qualify as a complexity factor. So when you discuss each of the complexity factors within the body of your report, that description and discussion should be compelling. It should be clearly formatted. It should be visually stunning. It should be a masterpiece. When you look at the tires and the rims for which the detail shop is charging you, when you look at the tires and rims, they should look perfect. They should be clean. The rims should sparkle. The tires should glisten with shiny stuff. And similarly, the complexity factors sections of your report should similarly shine, and the check sheet guides you in shining these sections of your report. Now, when it comes to the complexity factors, there's a finite listing of topics that comprise your complexity factors. Your complexity factors include your time involved with face-to-face, your review of records time, and your discussions of difficult issues, difficult disputes, your resolution of difficult disputes which involve complex medical decision making such as causation and apportionment. And when it comes to the face-to-face time, the entirety of your face-to-face interaction with the injured worker has to do with these key subsections within your report, such as the history, the relevant medical history, the social history, the occupational history, the activities of daily living assessment, and the physical examination. These are the activities in your face-to-face evaluation that you want to pursue. So you want to obtain an accurate history. You want to obtain an accurate relevant medical history. You want to discuss the social history, and you want to hit all of these high notes in the face-to-face evaluation. And the check sheet guides you as to how to conduct complete evaluations in each of these sections of the face-to-face evaluation. Similarly, the check sheet guides you in qualifying your review of records as a complexity factor, and in credibly and persuasively communicating to the parties that your review does indeed qualify as a complexity factor. Similarly for the causation complexity factor, and similar for the apportionment complexity factor, the check sheet gives you specific instructions about lines of questioning and issues to pursue in each of these sections of your report in order to qualify these sections of your report as compensable complexity factors for which you deserve to be paid in full. Okay? And just to demonstrate how the template addresses each of these issues, let's talk a little bit more about the check sheet and how it addresses the review of records. Okay, so let's talk briefly about the review of records, and then we'll conclude today's discussion. Now, the check sheet is so important and so powerful because, as we've demonstrated up till now, the check sheet allows you to comply with all of the labor codes and codes of regulation that govern both the face-to-face evaluation and also the production of your report, and it allows you to demonstrate to the parties that you complied with those particular regulations and that you are a credible and a persuasive qualified medical evaluator who has meticulous attention to detail, which therefore strengthens your case for being reimbursed in full and also strengthens the opinions and conclusions throughout the body of your report. And nowhere does the check sheet better handle this aspect of compliance and credibility than with the review of records. So the check sheet helps you confirm that your review of records complies with the 4 laws that govern the review of records. I don't know how many of you know this, but there are no less than 4 laws that deal with the review of records. And in order for your review of records to qualify as a complexity factor, the review of records must comply with all the instructions contained within these 4 laws, and the check sheet makes sure that you comply with all of these 4 laws. The check sheet makes sure that within the review of records section of your report, you restate the time involved with the review of records. And the time that you quote for the review of records time down in the review of records section of your report is the same and is consistent with the same amount of time that you describe above in the separate section as the beginning of your report, which describes your use of review of records as a complexity factor. So there's consistency between these two descriptions of your review of records, which only serves to enhance the credibility and persuasiveness of not only this section of your report, but it also indicates to the reader that you're accurate, that you're consistent, that you have fastidious attention to detail, all of which impresses the reader as to your competence as a qualified medical evaluator. Finally, in terms of credibility and persuasiveness, imagine a case wherein you invoke review of records as a complexity factor, and you bill for a large number of hours for your review of records, such as 5 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours, 12 hours. Do you think it would enhance the credibility of that billing level? Do you think it would enhance the persuasiveness of that billing level for you to include a photo of the records in cases that involve an extraordinary amount of time involved in this billing procedure? So I include for you here an example of a recent stack of medical records that I received. And when the reader of the report views this stack of medical records, which exceeds 3,000 pages, this enhances the credibility of the billing level of the review of records and enhances the credibility of my billing time and my invoking of the review of records as a complexity factor. In other words, without this picture, a picture is worth 1,000 words, correct? Without this picture, the reader of the report and the payer of the report is simply left with dealing and grappling with whether or not the tires were shined and whether or not the rims were cleaned. A picture like this makes the billing level visual to the payer of the report, and it demonstrates to the payer of the report that you complied with all of the requirements of the billing level for the review of records as a complexity factor. Okay, so in extraordinary cases, the check sheet guides you and instructs you to include a photo of the records when that photo would help to support your compliance with all of the requirements of the review of records as a complexity factor. Okay, so doctors, I just want to share with you the check sheet itself. We could spend the better part of an entire new program, 6-hour program, talking about how the check sheet will help you to produce infinitely better QME reports, but we don't have time for that in today's discussion. So I just want to share with you how the check sheet looks and how you would use some of the sections within the check sheet. So here is the check sheet. It's a 5-page document and has a table of contents here, and you can click any one of these sections, such as the review of records section, and it'll take you to the discussion as to how to handle your review of records in that section. So it has a table of contents that allows you to zip to the appropriate section of your report. And let's just go through some of the sections of the report. We have the introductory section, and we talked about how the check sheet helps you to comply with labor codes and codes of regulation involved with your evaluation. Has a section on dealing with the complexity factors. Has a section on how to install headers and footers within the body of the report. Talks about some formatting suggestions to help create visual appeal and ease on the eyeball of the reader of your report. Contains all of the required headings described in CCR 10606, and here are all the headings in the report, and you should check your report against these headings in the check sheet to make sure that you've included every single section within the body of your report. It encourages you to include summary statements at the end of each major topic heading to summarize for the reader what your analysis is of the particular discussion in the body of your report. So for example, in diagnostic studies, many times qualified medical evaluators will order diagnostic studies such as MRI studies or X-ray studies or electrodiagnostic studies, and they'll simply describe the findings of those studies without telling the reader of the report what the findings of those studies actually mean in terms of the condition of the examinee and the examinee's eligibility for workers' compensation benefits. So this is where the summary statements provide your analysis to the reader of the report, thereby making your report infinitely more credible and infinitely more persuasive to the reader of the report. There's a review of records section report that tells you exactly how to fashion that section of your report. There's a section on your activities of daily living assessment. The physical examination section of the check sheet will blow you away because it allows you to exactly comply with all the requirements of the AMA guides in terms of the use of the proper instruments and the use of the proper physical examination findings. It includes a section on how to handle diagnostic studies, the diagnosis section, the causation section, and here from the causation section down, including permanent and stationary, permanent impairment, this is where your opinions and conclusions must qualify as substantial medical evidence, and the check sheet coaches you as to the necessity of providing how and why reasoning to support your opinions and conclusions. And so, doctors, this is a very complete check sheet. It will allow you to infinitely improve the content and quality of your report, thereby making your report infinitely more usable to the reader of the report who relies on your report for resolving disputed issues within the workers' compensation system. So, doctors, I hope this helps you. The check sheet was designed to help you in better fashioning your reports to meet the needs of the readers of your reports who depend on our reports to make their own jobs much, much easier. And if you're a new qualified medical evaluator, you may not know this, but the time as a qualified medical evaluator and the time for qualified medical evaluators has never been better. If you're an experienced qualified medical evaluator who's been around for a long time, you'll agree with me that the opportunity to succeed as a qualified medical evaluator has never been better than it is now. We're now facing the confluence or the collision of several forces that conspire to create tremendous opportunity for us as qualified medical evaluators. And qualified medical evaluators such as yourself who commit to excellence in producing high quality reports stand to reap a great harvest of a flood of new evaluations as more and more qualified medical evaluators leave the system, number one, and as difficult cases become assigned to the better and more qualified and more competent qualified medical evaluators who develop a reputation for producing excellent and complete and compliant and credible and persuasive reports. So I strongly encourage you to adopt the use of this check sheet in every single evaluation and in every single report that you submit to the parties. And remember, again, the end goal of this entire program and the end goal of this check sheet is to help you as a qualified medical evaluator produce what the parties in the system need. And the parties in the system need and demand one simple thing from us as qualified medical evaluators. They need what they refer to as high quality reports. And a high quality report is to be distinguished from what the parties are currently loath about receiving, and that has to do with low quality reports which are unable to resolve disputes within the workers' compensation system. So I want to thank you for your commitment to excellence, and I want to encourage you to stay with your reports and push yourself and push yourself and push yourself as long and as hard as it takes to comply with all the requirements described on the check sheet. And when you do this, when it comes time to put a stamp on that envelope and put your QME report in the mail, you can feel comfortable and confident that you've done the very best job of which you're possible, and that your report has the capacity to do its job out there in the marketplace in providing benefits for injured workers who desperately need those benefits, and in helping resolve disputed issues that allow cases to move swiftly forward to conclusion in the workers' compensation system. So again, I want to thank you for your commitment to excellence, and I encourage you to renew yourself to producing higher and higher quality reports throughout the duration of your career. So for today, this is Dr. Perry Carpenter. I want to thank you for joining me on this discussion. I look forward to being with you on future discussions as well. And for now, I'm wishing you best of success in your career as a qualified medical